the 3. 3rd and goal, UNLV. All tied at 7. Anthony Calandria with time. End zone. Caught! D'Angelo Irvin.
Really nice throw and catch by Anthony Calandria and D'Angelo Irvin. And you saw Anthony Calandria at the line of scrimmage signaling out to his wide receiver.
Phil Longo picked it up from Mike Leach at a coach's clinic long ago. Matoyer scrambling, looking, fires. It may have been across the line of scrimmage. He throws a pick, and it's intercepted, and it's being taken back by a Morris Brown, who leaps into the end zone, 47 yards. What a disaster for the Bearcats.
Had an interception last week against Idaho State, and a pick 6 tonight against Sam Houston. And
2nd down, 7. Sam Houston blitzes. Calandria has time, loads up, goes deep. That's Bradley, and he got it! Bradley came out with it, and he's down at the 3.
And that's why he's one of the most complete backs in the Mountain West.
Bradley, 49 yards on that one. Thomas right side. Is he in? Yes! Touchdown! Bradley, 5 catches, 118 yards. He had the long touchdown catch. And that sets up Thomas for the score.
Please reset the game clock to 11.
Wants to see his team finish strong.
Coco Brown breaks loose. And Coco Brown is going to take this one on 4th and 1, 53 yards for the touchdown.
This offensive line getting off the football, getting up to the second level to the linebackers. Untouched. Coco Brown.
We do have great cell service here tonight. The clock, not so much. Calandria sweeps on the right side, breaks a couple tackles, and is in the end zone. Yeah, this guy can play. He's had a wonderful night tonight. That's 13 yards.
Reads the block, gets downhill.
You want this, you got that. No way, watch him walk right past you. Run fast while you have the chance. Don't speak, let him look right at you.
Welcome back to the Scarlet Standard, where, as you just saw, UNLV pulled out a gutsy performance last week against Sam Houston. They pulled out an early 31-7 lead. The defense looked clearly much improved. They looked a lot better, to be honest with you. It was a 1,000% change from their performance against Idaho State. We have a big game coming this weekend, and it is a Big Ten Power 4 opponent in UCLA. UCLA lost their home opener, 43-10 to Utah, and then with the highlight of the Nico debut. But to bring us a little hindsight into UCLA football and a little game preview for UCLA, let's welcome Benjamin Royer from the OC Register. Benjamin, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
How's the team look? I've read some clippings of what Deshaun Foster said after he played Utah in game 1. He mentioned them being close. Is that necessarily true, or is that were we watching 2 different games?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the dynamic right now coming into this UNLV game for UCLA. I think they want to try and pump the excitement and positivity as much as they can. It's never good to get beat up in your first game of the season, especially when you have a little bit of enthusiasm, some steam coming into that first game with Nico Yamalava being there to kind of generate some excitement over the program. But of course, I don't think the fans necessarily like to hear we were close after losing by 33 to a former Pac-12 foe in Utah. Just a few years ago, UCLA beat Utah at the Rose Bowl. So I don't necessarily think the fans were that excited to hear that. However, it seems to be from a coach down to the player level. That's the mindset they're taking is, there was a bunch of learning experiences in that first game against Utah. Truly nothing really went well. The run game wasn't working. The pass game wasn't working because they were down so quickly by three scores so fast. And then they weren't able to stop the run. So I think that's, there's so many different things you can point to and say it didn't go well. So, it's one thing to dwell on that. I think Deshaun Foster's taking hey, we have a game this week. Let's try and flip that, generate some excitement before Big Ten play starts. If UCLA doesn't show up against UNLV, it could be a big problem. One, for Deshaun Foster, and two, for the program.
I've read the Reddit boards a little bit, and there are some fans saying if they lose to UNLV, it could be a 0-1 win season. I think that's a little dramatic. I think there's too much talent on their roster for that. But I think, times have changed a little bit. I saw your tweet, a couple years ago, maybe even prior to Barry Odom, like when UNLV last played them under Marcus Arroyo, UCLA may have been a double-digit favorite against UNLV. And now, as you've seen, like, times have, it's kind of flipped a little bit. UNLV's program's on the upswing. Barry did a great job the last 2 years, and Dan Mullen's trying to build his own culture and continue that momentum. And, UCLA opened as a slight favorite. What is your expectation for the environment at Allegiant Stadium this weekend?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. UCLA fans don't travel very well, so I wouldn't expect a big UCLA crowd there. I do think on the field, UCLA is going to be pretty excited about this. I think they can look to UNLV's first two games and know that it can be a little easier to score on them than, Utah was. Utah looked great defensively all around. Especially, I think Nico's going to show some more confidence passing wise. I mean, if you think about this, Nico played all last year against SEC defenses. I mean, that's not something to shrug about. That's really difficult. And he played well against SEC defenses. So I think you're going to see him have a bounce back game. I think what you're going to see at Allegiant is just a bunch of these factors, these players that UCLA was obviously touting early on in the season. I think Nico's one of them. Quasi Gilmer, wide receivers, another. Javion Thomas is supposed to be their big, running back this season, and he could hardly get the ball. He hardly got the ball, and two, when he did get the ball, he didn't have much success with it. So I think they are viewing UNLV as kind of a bounce back situation. The environment game wise might not be great, I think, but I think either way it'll be competitive. But UCLA, I think, sees an opportunity for a little bit more of an offensive explosion, especially only putting up 10 points at home last week. Do you
think the offensive line was an issue against Utah, or was that more of a just Utah they were just ready to go? More of a preparation thing?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say it was necessarily an issue because there were so many glaring issues in week one for UCLA. Offensive line definitely was one of them. Nico had to move around a lot, trying to make plays for himself. Here's the proof. It's never a good sign when you played three running backs in the game and your leading rusher was your quarterback. That kind of says a lot about how the offensive line performed in the game. Utah sacked Nico 4 times. So those things don't look great. Deshaun Foster is very open. He said we've done 6, I believe somewhere between 6 and 8 different combinations of 5 offensive linemen. For example, all fall we knew that Olufunto Akinshilo was going to be the center. And then a week before the game, Sam Ewan, who was the starter at center last year, started running with the first team again. So things obviously were fluid and changing up until the game started. I wouldn't necessarily, it's an issue that the issue I think they might find is there's been very little stability on the offensive line over the last few years. So I think no matter what it is, no matter what team it is, no matter how you look at it, it's difficult when you have 5 different guys, lining up every year, every other game. Offensive line is not necessarily a chemistry thing, but you need to know what the guy to your left and right is going to do in those situations. I think the right side of the offensive line might be the strongest side. Julian Armella at right guard and Garrett DeGiorgio at right tackle. I'd be stunned if either of them were moved from those 2 spots all season long. And if they are moved, they would just move to another position on the offensive line. I think any combination of linemen includes those 2 guys. So they're going to need to step up in a big way. You might want to move one of them to the left side of the line and try and build a little bit of consistency, some comfort there. So I wouldn't say it's an issue, but it definitely needs to improve. I mean, UCLA had a very, very poor rushing offense in week 1, and I think that was partially because of the offensive line.
Was that that clip posted by that UCLA Barstool page of Nico with a hand brace and limp? Was he actually injured, or is that just over exaggeration?
Yeah, it's definitely an over-exaggeration. If he was injured or had any ailments, you wouldn't know it. Practice the last 2 days. Nico's been fine. No braces, no anything going on. He's been practicing as normal. We spoke to Deshaun Foster 2 days ago, and he said that Nico's ready to bounce back. So if he is injured or carrying something that we don't know about, it's not clear, and Deshaun Foster hasn't tipped off to that. I would expect Nico to line up at quarterback. I think part of it is Nico's first game had so much media attention to it that even the small stuff, I think people probably skewed a little bit and emphasize the small things a little bit more than you would expect. I mean, even I did it in an article I wrote the other day. I mean, I watched all of Nico's pregame preparation, and I wrote about that on Sunday after the game. It's easy to point out those things when you know what you're looking for. So people obviously were looking for something to point out, and that might have just been something for post-game, recovery.
Do you think you just mentioned that all eyes were on him for game 1. Do you think after that performance by UCLA as a team, there's going to be more eyeballs on him this week?
I doubt it. It's not a nationally televised game. It's not, there's not the same excitement drumming about this. I think people are going to be watching Nico all season long. I think Nico is a segment all season long on, talk shows. I mean, if I'm ESPN, such an easy segment every week is how did Nico do and how did Joey Aguilar do at Tennessee? Because Joey Aguilar and Tennessee are probably going to have a very good season. I mean, Joey Aguilar had a great start to his career at Tennessee, and he was here at UCLA in spring camp just a few months ago. So I think that's going to be an easy segment. So people are going to be watching him. Look at it this way. If I was Nico, I would have been a little nervous for that first game. Would he have ever admitted that? I doubt that. He's a very confident player. Sean talks very confidently about his ability to, adjust as the game goes on. However, now those first game jitters are out of the way. Something I noticed earlier today is that was Nico's the second fewest amount of passing yards that Nico's ever recorded in a game. The lowest was last year in the college football playoff against Ohio State. So he's coming off the 2 worst games of his career, arguably. So how does Nico bounce back for that? That's a big question. So I think people will be watching, just not the same eyes that, 8 p.m., the only game that's really on ESPN.
Looking at like you mentioned, they got kind of down early. Like you mentioned, Foster's run pass splits were 65-35. You have to balance that out to be able to take some pressure off of Nico.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But I think part of that is talking to Deshaun after the game and then earlier this week. Part of that is they were kind of Utah forced their hand and forced UCLA to pass the ball more. I think in a perfect world, offensive coordinator Tino Sinceri came in from Indiana. It's his first year running an offense. In a perfect world, it's more 50-50 there. It sounds like they want to run the ball a lot, maybe even 45-55. But when you go down 20-0, you kind of have to respond in some way, and the quickest way to get points is to throw the ball. And I think UCLA was forced to do that a little too early, they weren't comfortable with that, I think. They weren't playing comfortable. They start the second half going for a field goal instead of going in on 4th and 4 in Utah territory. Those decisions kind of force you to pass the ball more. If they get a score there, it was a 1-score game potentially if they got a 2-point conversion. So that's an entirely different game where you can run the ball because, if your defense gets a stop. But that was also a big issue. Defense couldn't get stops.
Deshaun's quote about that play was very interesting.
Yes.
I didn't quite understand it from, a football perspective. I guess maybe like a deeper analytics, it made more sense. But you're trailing 20-7 or whatever it was at that point. You're down. It's 4th and 4. You have kind of momentum if you get that 4th down. That's like you just mentioned. That's a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, of course, it's easy to be the person sitting in the stands or sitting in the press box or wherever you are at home yelling at the TV. It's easy to be the person to say, hey, let's go for it. UCLA messed up a fourth down conversion on their first drive of the game, and that could have obviously switched things. And I think Deshaun was coming from a place of, hey, maybe I did that earlier in the game and it didn't work out. I'd rather be safe here and at least gets points on the board. As a coach, I think you want to trust your defense, but again, UCLA's defense wasn't doing anything to say, hey, trust me. So I personally would have probably gone for that. I think you needed 7 points there. It was 23-7. You get this, you get 6 points plus a 2-point conversion. Then it's suddenly 23-15. That's an entirely different football game. And Kyle Whittingham in Utah just from there put the pedal to the metal, made some big plays. They got an interception on Nico that kind of put the game away. And, it was never really close after that first drive where they settled for the field goal.
So how are they obviously you mentioned it being a bounce back spot for UCLA. How are they viewing UNLV after their 2 games that they put on tape?
We were talking to a few guys today, some of the players, Jalen Woods, a linebacker, he's going to start on Saturday. He's a redshirt freshman, but they're really trusting him and they really like what they see from him. He was saying, he thought that UNLV looked really good in those first 2 games, really balanced attack. He thought, so I think they're taking UNLV as seriously as they should be. I mean, like we said at the beginning of the show, they're just a 2-point favorite, UCLA. You can't shrug and say, hey, we're going to UNLV. Maybe in years past, that was an easy thing to do. But again, UNLV is a different football program. I mean, Barry Odom helped build it back up. And then Dan Mullen's no slouch as a college football coach. So those things, if I'm Deshaun Foster, I might be a little nervous about playing UNLV. A fun little side storyline is Deshaun Foster was supposed to be coaching at Allegiant the stadium this season. He was hired as the Raiders running backs coach before, he was running backs coach at UCLA, hired as the Raiders running backs coach, and a few weeks later is hired to becoming UCLA's head coach. So, I think there's a lot, maybe stuff on his shoulders, things you're thinking about when you're going to Vegas for a game like this. I think they're taking it seriously. They know that UNLV did a really good job running the ball in their first 2 games. Again, Idaho State and Sam Houston State are not teams that anyone's writing home about, but that's not the point. Running the ball effectively builds momentum, builds confidence in your players, something UCLA did not do well in week 1, but it's something UNLV did in both week 0 and week 1. They need to get more pressure on the offensive line. You're going to see players like Gary Smith III and Keanu Williams, both redshirt seniors that had season-ending injuries last year. They're the front 2 of the front 4, and then you're going to have edge rushers, and they're still really figuring out who those edge rushers that are going to play are going to be. But if Gary Smith III, especially, I think he's probably the best defensive player on the team, can get pressure, it's going to be a difficult game, I think.
Yeah, like you mentioned, that they kind of did not use Jaden Thomas a lot in that Sam Houston game. He went nuts against Idaho State. He looked a little banged up against Sam Houston, so once they got up big, it kind of looked like they didn't really use him much. But if he's healthy going into this game, it's he's focal point number 1 of that defense, and that opens up a lot for Anthony Calandria. Calandria looked really, really settled in Dan Mullen's offense the first 2 weeks. Have you? What is their expectation or game plan trying to go up against him? Because obviously, they're going to throw him probably 95% of the snaps and Orgy at some point in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it to look at is Calandria can move. I mean, and that's something that UCLA really struggled with Devin Dampier last week, is a quarterback that can move out of the pocket and make plays for himself. I mean, we were just watching the highlight reel right before we got on here. I mean, he moves and knows how to weave his way for extra yards. It's something Jalen Woods, I'll bring him up again, said earlier today. He said, UNLV is going to watch what Utah did to us, and they're going to try and replicate that. It's their job to not let that happen. But UNLV has good reason to want to replicate that. And Orgy, he was in the Big Ten last year. He knows UCLA well. They know what they're looking at. They've watched UCLA on game film, and he can move as well. So you're just looking at 2 quarterbacks that can use their legs, good running backs that can use their legs. it's trying to avoid Utah happening again. I don't think it's going to happen again. I think it's such a shock of a week 1 game to the system that you just can't let it happen a second time. But there's probably that little bit of doubt creeping in no matter what. If the defense didn't have a good first week, what's stopping it from having a bad second week?
I kind of wrote that in my preview of this game is, one of my matchup keys for UNLV was they need to start early and they need to start fast. Utah threw punches early at UCLA and put them in scramble mode, and the Bruins kind of, never really recovered from that. UNLV kind of needs to do the same thing. If they can go up, 1 or 2 scores early, you're kind of just going to force them to make Nico beat you. And from the press clippings that they're putting out there, and those videos that UNLV's corner Amaris Brown put out there, it kind of seems like they're not really afraid of Nico. And, that's bulletin board material for UCLA. But, if they're looking at it from that perspective and they want to get a fast start, that's, like you just mentioned, that could be worrisome and put some doubt in that UCLA defense right away.
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely. I mean, it's important for UCLA to stop the first drive. I mean, UCLA wasn't able to stop the first drive. They couldn't stop the second drive. They couldn't stop the third drive. Utah first punted in the second half. I mean, that cannot happen in modern day college football, especially when you're entering a game. Most of the beat writers I work with predicted UCLA to win that first game. I mean, I said they were going to lose, and I'm very proud of my predicting abilities. But you need to show that you can do the opposite of what you did week 1. And, Deshaun Foster, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but you're going to see the biggest change from us from week 1 to week 2. And, that's a lot to write on. I mean, during fall training camp, when, the football program restricted some media access for us, he said the reason for that is, when we win, we'll be marketed. Well, you didn't win week 1. And now you've also thrown out this other promise of you're going to see a big change from week 1 to week 2. So what happens when the big change doesn't happen? I think they really do need to see a big change and stop UNLV early.
That's kind of, the same thing Mullen pushed after week 0 to week 1, because obviously it was kind of a bigger headline with Dan Mullen return, how badly the defensive side of the ball struggled against Idaho State, giving up, they beat them 38-31. Any FBS, especially one that's trying to compete for a CFP spot, needs to take care of business, and they didn't do that till late. And you kind of saw that, then make that adjustment early. I mean, they got up, their first drive was 6 plays, right down the field. They punched them right in the mouth. They gave them a touchdown right back, and then they scored 24 unanswered till Sam Houston finally got on the scoreboard again late. And it kind of showed, the one thing that wasn't really mentioned about that game in the second half was when it was in hand, their defense, they were playing their second unit on defense. Like first team all preseason first team all conference player like Marcel McDuffie. He played 75 snaps against Idaho State. He only played 38 against Sam Houston. They were trying to get reps for guys and rotate in, and you kind of saw that. It kind of got uncomfortable late, but Calandria looked they looked like they made that adjustment from week 0 to week 1. Are they going to make that adjustment from week 1 to week 2? And it's kind of the same thing that UCLA's in right now. Is UCLA going to make that jump from week 1 to week 2? And that's going to make, I think a lot of people are, knocking UCLA's defense and how many points they gave up. A lot of people are knocking UNLV's defense for how many points they've given up. I think you may see a lower scoring game than people expect.
I see a score in the 20s. I see a score in the 20s, both teams in the 20s. I don't see a back and forth thrilling duel. I see a very painstakingly strategized football game. I mean, Dan Mullen knows how to coach very well, and he knows what games like this are. I think a chance for UNLV to go 3-0 is such a big thing already in the season like this. UCLA is still looking for win number 1. I agree. I don't think it's going to be a very high scoring game. I think UCLA is going to purposefully be more meticulous too with game planning as well.
Yeah, I think you're going to see fixes early in the scripted plays, the scripted offense, scripted defense, and then when adjustments come, when are they going to come and how quickly are those going to come? Are they going to come, is it going to be in a 14-14 game in the second quarter? Probably not. It's probably, somewhere 10-7, 14-7, somewhere around there. And it's going to be how the depth is going to show. And it's good. This is this is the first real test for UNLV too, in a sense. Utah was no slouch for UCLA to open the season with. So they've been tested. UNLV really, other than adversity, has not. So it's kind of, you got to, are they built for it? And it's really going to show with all these former 4-star transfers coming down, in a sense, from schools like UCLA. They had the offensive lineman transfer back to UNLV, and then these guys coming in from like Arizona, Oregon, all these schools. Are they actually built for this or not? And it's going to be, I think, I've written very much about it being a culture test these first couple weeks. It's really going to test what Dan Mullen's building. And I think this is also going to really test what Deshaun Foster's trying to build from last year. This is a game that you think a Big Ten UCLA school should win. And like you've mentioned in years past, they're probably a double-digit favorite. But, that's the state of where UCLA is right now. And UCLA, this is the must. I think if there's a must win early in the season, this is a must win for them.
Oh, you have to win this game, and then you have to win next week against New Mexico as well. It's like to have two must wins where you're like stressing about the must win aspect of it all. It's not a good place to be if you're UCLA football. Again, I don't fault UCLA for technically parting ways with Chip Kelly, who left for Ohio State. I don't fault them. And maybe you should have parted ways with Chip Kelly a year earlier than that, but I don't fault them for that. But the expectations need to be high. And if you're deciding that you're resigning yourself to a 3 or 4 win season, then what does the future of your program look like? And how are you going to get recruits to your program? So I think getting 2 wins back to back for against UNLV and New Mexico, that's early must win territory, because then I look at the schedule and maybe there's only two other games I can see them winning, which would be Maryland and Northwestern. And Northwestern just looked really bad in their first game of the season. So that's an easy one to point to. But if you lose to UNLV and then you lose to New Mexico, you might only have 1 or 2 wins this year. And that just can't happen in the state of where UCLA is right now, I think.
Do you think Deshaun Foster's seat's hot right now?
I don't think so. I think he gets a 3rd year regardless of what happens. Martin Jarman, the athletic director, has spoken very highly of him. Deshaun got this job based off merit, based off guys liking him. I don't think that's changed. I think the players love playing for him. But can he personally change as a coach and find the ways to adjust? As he said before the week 1 game last year at Hawaii, they almost lost to Hawaii. And he said he was scared going into that game, and he was never scared as a player. He said he was never scared as an assistant coach, but the newness of being a head coach scared him. So he said he doesn't feel that anymore, but it's time to back that up with results. I think it's important to see how Tino Sinceri kicks on as an offensive coordinator. The players love him, and I think there was a lot of moving parts to the offense we saw, but we didn't really get to see it unlocked against Utah because they were playing from behind so early. I would like to see what Tino Sinceri can do. Maybe Tino helps develop that offense a little more. And then Coach Malloy on defense, he had one of the better defenses in the Big Ten last year. I think they trust his ability to coach. It's just finding those guys. Who are you going to play is the big question. And I think they're still trying to figure out who is the best starting 11 we can put on the field on defense. UCLA has a ton of former 4-star prospects, but again, like UNLV, for example, there's a reason they're dropping down from those schools they were at. They're finding the new spot. Where am I more likely to start? Where am I more likely to play? But that also comes with, I wasn't playing at my previous school for a reason. So I think UCLA is looking for those guys to step up and find a way to make an impact. Some of these guys are going to have to show up soon, though.
I think, like you just mentioned, their defense was good last year. It was very underrated. But, being on the field for 37 minutes, they're going to break. They're going to break at some point. They have to bounce out. They have to control the ball more. And like you just mentioned, if what Tino can do on the offensive side of the ball, can he unleash Nico more? I mean, Nico's running ability was fine. Maybe he unleashes, some more RPO looks, something in that regard. And then it opens up their running game, which then opens up their passing game. So it's just going to be a matter of what kind of game plan do you think, after seeing how the UNLV's defense has improved, what kind of game plan do you think they have going in? Obviously, you mentioned more balance, but do you think it's going to be? I mean, Nico really only threw the ball 22 times. Do you think it's more than that? Do you think they're going to hand the ball off more? What kind of are you expecting?
I think they're going to hand the ball off more off the bat. I think they found something in Anthony Woods this last week, Utah transfer. Funny enough, but he was at Idaho FCS for 2 years before then, and he was one of the better players in the Big Sky. And they found something in him. I think he scored the only touchdown of the game on a 19-yard wheel route. It was really nice play. He has great speed. I think they want to get the ball to Javion Thomas. I think they also want to get the ball to Jalen Berger, but Jalen Berger is now in his second year as a Bruin, and he still hasn't shown the ability to get extra yardage after contact. So I think you're going to see that. And then I think they also do want to pass more. I think Nico struggled to get to Quasi Gilmer in the first half. Quasi Gilmer got 3 catches on the same drive in the second half, and that was his 3 catches of the game. And they need to get that connection needs to show up quicker, I think. Quasi Gilmer is a game changer if they get him the ball. And Nico and Quasi walked off the bus together at fall camp every day. They are close, and they need to show it on the field too. Every quarterback has the guys they favor on the field, whether they admit it or not. I think Quasi Gilmer, if you're going to favor a guy, he's still really good at football too. So I don't think it's a problem if you favor getting the ball to him. He's really talented. And then Mikey Matthews as well, Cal transfer. I think he has a lot of skills that can be used and actually develop, as the season goes on, and find some interesting routes, plays for him. I think Tino wants to use Mikey Matthews a lot. One other player for UNLV fans to know is Hudson Habermel, the tight end. He had 1 catch. This is his return from a torn ACL. He's in his, I believe, his 6th or 7th year of college football. He has, 3 degrees from UCLA, 2 of which are master's degrees. I mean, this guy is smart, and he's using the UCLA education as much as he can while he's still playing football. This guy will be playing on Sundays, no doubt in my mind. But the question is, can he make a large impact on this offense? I think Nico needs to target Hudson because he's just a big guy at 6'7", and he catches the ball and runs well.
Quasi was the receiver that said that he was going for trying to win the Bolitnikoff, right?
Yeah, that's him. I mean, he's got the confidence. It's just, can you back up your confidence is the big question.
What is what are your keys for UCLA to win this game?
I think it's stopping the run. I mean, I think everything starts there now, since they did so poorly at it in week 1. Can you stop the run? Can you tackle? Tackling was such an issue. They were 1 or 2 steps behind every play, and that can't happen. I think stopping the run early, stopping a drive early, as you said, for UNLV to win, it's speeding things up. I think UCLA to win, it's slowing things down, which is kind of taking a page out of the men's basketball team with Mick Cronin. Mick Cronin loves to muck things up, make things uncomfortable, slow down the pace of the game. Don't let UNLV cook. I think it's that simple. Make some stops early, and I think allow some edge rushers to emerge as guys that you trust. Right now, I don't think there's one on the field that you necessarily trust right now.
What's your keys for UNLV to win this game?
For UNLV, I think it's try and replicate Utah's success. I think there's such a clear playbook of what to do against UCLA. Move fast, run the ball. Don't be afraid to go out of the pocket. I mean, UCLA did not seem like it was. They eventually got 2 tackles for loss, but it really did not seem like that was going to happen in this game. I think if you move around a lot, you're going to see success. If you move fast, you're going to see success. UCLA was also playing a little conservative on defense. They were playing one of their edge rushers as a QB spy a little bit. And, he's not comfortable in that position. I don't think Jason Busick was doing that. And I think I think that was maybe a design flaw that they might recognize this week and change, but take advantage of slower guys playing positions that they might not be.
Calandria?
What do you say?
Do you think they throw a spy on Calandria?
I don't think so. I don't think they will. but we can't be sure until we see them suit up Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, against Idaho State, he ran for 97 yards after sack yards were taken out, and you could kind of tell he was kind of, they had the Idaho State defense had 8 hurries and 3 sacks. He was kind of running for his life a little bit. Utah, and then against Sam Houston, you could kind of tell he didn't really have to until they had the one late touchdown where they had 2 designed quarterback runs for him. One was this one that he scored on. So I think, if he's limited to staying in the pocket, you're going to make him beat you with his arm. And, I think that's kind of the game that UCLA wants them to play. If they can slow down Jaden Thomas, then make Landry beat you and make a wide receiver beat you other than Jaden Bradley.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Calandria is a very talented quarterback, but it's not underestimating him as well. I think UCLA is going to be comfortable rushing more and doing some blitz packages. But if Calandria starts to have success, you're going to immediately have to adjust to that. And as we said, we have the scripted plays always at the start of a game. But what happens when the scripted plays don't work right off the bat? I think UCLA took too long to adjust against Utah. If something's going awry really quickly against UNLV, it's time to adjust and change the strategy really quickly and make sure that you guys can't move fast. I think the moving fast aspect is the thing that's going to UCLA might struggle with this year with so many new personnel on the team, 57 new players. I mean, that's rare in college football, even in the transfer era. So I think that's adjusting to that is going to be important.
What's your prediction for this game?
I'm still deciding it, so don't hold me to it right now, but I'm feeling 28-24 UCLA wins. That's where I'm leaning towards right now. But as the time goes on, when I watch more UNLV game film, I feel less confident about that. I feel like it was a clear trap game after a potential week 1 win. And now after a week 1 loss, it's even more of a trap. So right now I'm feeling UCLA wins 28-24. But again, not confident about that.
I'm kind of with you. I think whoever does win, it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be within, it's going to be close. I think, Vegas gets it right pretty much on the spread most of the time. I think it's going to be somewhere around there. I think it's going to be a 1-score game. And I think it could come down to, like we kind of talked about, maybe not being up and down per se in a shootout, but maybe who has the ball last. Yeah,
I agree.
And my prediction was, I think I had UCLA winning this game early in the season, but I'm sorry, preseason wise, I had UNLV going 10-2 with their 2 losses being to Boise State and UCLA. Like you mentioned, I watch more of that Utah game, the more I've seen the change and evolve in Dan Mullen, I'm kind of pulling my prediction too. So I'm kind of with you. I think it can go either way, and I think it's going to be somewhere in that 28-24, 27-24, somewhere around there, 30-27, something like that. I don't think it's going to be this explosive shootout like people think.
I think I'm with you there. It's just, I think that people want it. This is how I'm viewing the game. If you're a UNLV or a UCLA fan, you might be pulling your hair out. If you're a neutral fan, I think you're going to be watching a very good college football game.
I agree. That's exactly where I'm at. I think, there's high expectations for UNLV, which has led some of, their fan base to believe that this is a game they should win. You weren't saying that a couple years ago, but this is a game that they should win and they should take care of, especially watching that Utah game film of UCLA. But then, it's the same kind of boat for UCLA. It's UCLA's in a different spot than they've been in a long time. And like you just mentioned, UNLV may have never been looked at a must-win game, but now it is. And then, this is the bounce back and key spot for UCLA. And I think it's really going to show what I think Deshaun Foster's made of as a head coach. He had his first year. Like you mentioned, he has 57 new guys. What is that foundation looking like now that you finally have your guys in there? And do they bounce back from adversity or do they not? And then, it's going to put all eyeballs on him. And he was already, like you kind of mentioned, uncomfortable in that spot. It's going to get even worse when that seat starts to get a little bit hotter.
Yeah, it's a big character test. Can you bounce back? Do you have the guts to change your ways really quickly? And that's not just on the coaching staff; that's on the whole team as well. It's showing, hey, I'm new to UCLA, but can I push the Bruin spirit into me a little quicker? Sometimes it takes a few years for guys to feel that connected to a program. You've got 57 new guys, and you're asking them to do it immediately. It's time to show up or put up, and it's difficult that it's week 2. Then that's already a conversation we're having, but it's a reality UCLA is living with.
And I think, if UCLA does respond, and, as much as maybe being a homer a little bit, I would not want that happen to UNLV. But, what if UCLA does respond? That's going to put the spotlight right back on Nico. And that's kind of, what he wants in a sense. He wants to be able to prove himself. And it's a big prove-it spot for him as well. If he plays well and they win, the eyeballs are back on him in a good way. If he does not play well and they lose, it's, what's going on in Westwood.
Exactly. They lose and the attendance is going to continue to drop. I'll say that much. It wasn't good attendance for week 1. I promise you week 3 is not going to be great attendance. School's not in session yet at UCLA. So it's just not going to be that many. There's going to be very few students and very few people. It's a Friday night game too. I mean, you know what it's like to watch your university play in a large stadium. Allegiant's a huge stadium. When the crowd's not very big, it feels very small. And at the Rose Bowl, which holds more than 100,000, when you have only 20,000 or so people there, it feels like a high school football game. So it's important to build excitement, and that Nico does show up and help build excitement for the team, and that UCLA wins just so there's a little bit to hang your hat on. But right now, there's nothing to hang a hat on until you win a football game.
I agree. I kind of had that same feeling. Like you just mentioned, Allegiant for game 1 for game 1 week 0, even though it was a rescheduled game. They announced the attendance was 26,000, but when that game was, fans were shocked when Idaho State led for a majority of that game. It felt like an open door scrimmage. It felt like it was just, what is going on in here? It was nails. You could hear a pin drop in that stadium. It got loud in the fourth quarter when UNLV took the lead, but I mean, they're expecting. I don't know if they're expecting a huge UNLV crowd, in a sense, but it's the first time since UNLV has played at Allegiant Stadium that they started selling the third deck, so they're expecting a big crowd for this game. So we'll see how much UCLA does travel. I mean, the highest attended game that UNLV had last season, Allegiant holds 61 for football. The biggest crowd UNLV had last year was against Boise. They had just under 43. So they were expecting somewhere between that. We'll see. It is Vegas. Maybe UCLA fans will travel because it is Vegas. You never know. But yeah, I think, it opens a lot of doors for a lot of people. And I think it's going to open a lot of eyeballs. And let's see. I think it's going to be a great one.
For sure.
Well, thank you for doing this with me.
Of course.
It was great talking with you. Will you be in Vegas?
I won't be in Vegas. Newspaper budgets nowadays. So I'm staying back, but I'll be watching the game. I'll be tweeting live updates and live thoughts on what I'm seeing from UCLA football at the Ben Royer on X. Feel free to follow along with my coverage. I write for the LA Times as well. Covering some high school sports for them and Major League Baseball. So, feel free to follow along with my stuff. Sports is interesting no matter where it is.
You have speaking of high school football, there's a big high school game that's going to happen, 2 weeks when Gorman plays Mater Dei?
Yep. That's that. I covered that game last year. That is the game every year that everyone puts on their calendar. It's always a fun one. Yeah,
that's going to be exciting. It's kind of that Vegas LA action, like what, number 1, number 2 in the country again, right?
Yep, every single year. I mean, the sucky part about modern day high school football is it's the same 2 teams.
Yep. Well, thank you again, and I'll definitely keep in touch with you, and we can chit chat throughout the game.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. That was Benjamin Royer from the OC Register covering for UCLA football, and he also works for the LA Times. like you mentioned, this weekend's going to be a great game. And fans, if you haven't bought your tickets, buy them now at unlvtickets.com. My prediction for this game, I've not written it yet. I think I've gone back and forth. I've been, toss up 50-50. I think UNLV wins this game 27-24. I think it's going to be a lot tighter than what people expect. It's not going to be that 38-35 shootout that people are expecting, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong. I did see your comment down here. Jet is going to eat. So is Jaden Bradley. We'll see if how much Orgy plays, but I think it's going to be a Calandria show more than it's going to be an orgy. I do want to see an orgy zone in the end zone. An orgy in the end zone. That would be great. If you guys have any predictions, comments, drop them underneath this video. Obviously, you can interact with me on my media page, SS Media _Media LV, or you can follow me on my personal Twitter. I'm probably more active on my personal Twitter, bantering with people. But yeah, if you guys you also follow me on Substack at the Scarlet Standard if you haven't already. Be dropping game notes. I will be on the game doing media, so I'll try to get as much content and tweets out there as possible. But yeah, go Rebels.
There is a house in New Orleans.